All right, so let's talk about your Tier 1 field, Yates. How many people you got in there?
Yeah, so we got 3 running backs in Tier 1. I'm calling this the tier of players that it would not surprise me at all if they finish as the best running back in fantasy football this season.
That's the title of the tier.
Yeah, you could probably.
That's a long title.
Well, I just thought
it's like a Michael Scott, like
my
some
tiers,
business
my
papers
titles.
know how business still is. Yeah,
right. I am the assistant to the regional manager of this podcast, so I can make the tier names as long as I choose for them to be.
All right.
And as a result of that, I went very long out of the chutes. You could probably say that Christian McCaffrey deserves to be in a tier by himself. We did this mock draft exercise over the summer. If you've been listening to the summer shows, you heard us reference these. We did like 35 mocks. He went first overall 34 out of 35 times. That being said, in the interest of getting a few more names introduced, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, if you didn't see the graphic right there. And I want to talk about Bijan Robinson in this context because I thought it was a fairly narrowed gap between he and Breece Hall for the second running back. I don't know that last year was absolute rock bottom worst case scenario for Bijan in that Atlanta offense. I think it was absolute worst case scenario for the pass catchers in that Atlanta offense. But as a running back, regardless of how good your quarterback is or is not, pretty easy to turn around and hand the football off to that player. That being said, I think this is going to be a massive, massive leap for the Atlanta offense this upcoming season. I know people realize it's an upgrade going from Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota to Kirk Cousins. I don't think people know just how much of an offensive upgrade it is. Like, it is such a massive gap between Kirk Cousins and the 2 quarterbacks that started last year in Atlanta, which will have a ripple effect, a much better scheme as well. I think Bijan is going to go insane this upcoming season, mostly as a runner, but also he's such an incredible pass catcher as well. I know that coach speak can be nauseating because there's, generally speaking, a ton of optimism and not a lot of like, well, we're kind of concerned about this for Bijan. That being said, Stephania, they're saying all the right things about getting him involved in the correct way. Breece Hall is a superstar talent. I think Bijan Robinson in a vacuum is a slightly more talented player, which is why it was so close for me to choose between those 2 guys as the next up beyond CMC.
So interestingly, Bijan was one of the players featured in my piece on running back. So I had a chance to sit with him. Our piece, yes, Daniel, our piece.
I appreciate it.
But in talking with him, he really understands that the more you can do, the more versatile you are. And versatility is the key.
Yep.
The more you're going to be on the field. Being on the field creates opportunities, and then you get the ball in your hands and you score. And it wasn't just him telling me these things. And listen, we had a long conversation. This young man understands all these different facets of the game beyond just running and carrying the football. And he got that start at Texas, which I think, yay, Jonathan Brooks, we'll talk later on. But it was also the conversation I had with their new head coach, Raheem Morris. And I was down there right after Christian McCaffrey had signed his deal. And when the coaching staff was talking about how they were going to emulate some of that in the way they utilized Bijan Robinson. And legitimately, some of the things that they said were specific in terms of how they plan to use him differently. So It's not just smoke. Like you said, this is actually tangible plan where they plan to integrate him more so that he is touching the ball more frequently.
The last thing I'll say here is, although we are focused on the stuff that's new for Atlanta this year, there are some good incumbent things working in Bijan's favor, including the fact that last year he averaged 5.3 yards per carry on rushes up the middle behind one of the best interior offensive lines in all of the NFL. That was the second best of any running back in the league last year. So if they focus on Bijan as a between the tackles runner, that can be good things. I think it would be a whole lot more than just that. But for a guy who feels like he was kind of a disappointment last year because of the hype, 8 total touchdowns, well north of 1,000 total scrimmage yards, nearly 1,400, actually more than that, more than nearly 1,500 scrimmage yards for Bijan. So a guy that talented in a souped-up role in a much better offense, it screams breakout. Really, we were robbed of what should have been a breakout season last year for Bijan as a rookie. All signs pointing up for Bijan in year 2.
I think part of that field, and it's not trepidation, but when I look at your top tier, the other 2 guys don't have a guy behind him that had nearly as many touches as Tyler Algier. He had 200 touches in that Falcons offense. That's obviously going to change here.
Yeah.
We're not expecting Tyler Algier to be nearly as involved in this offense as he was last year.
I think he'll have a role still. He's a solid player. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie. I don't think it's going to be as involved this season. And, the Jets drafted back-to-back running backs in the 4th and 5th round this year. Breece Hall was not as efficient as a runner as Bijan last season. So I think I hear you on that, but I'm still bullish enough on Bijan. I don't think you can take a player 8th overall at a position that is being devalued by the league and expect him to be anything more than the Ferrari every single week.